Happy Ronald Acuña Jr. Day. The MVP is back for the Atlanta Braves. We'll talk all about that, and I'll answer many of your questions about Ronald Acuña Jr. and his return on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni, and you can find me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, and leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out as well by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Really appreciate your support here on the podcast. And it's a big day. And the Braves are back home, shaking off a rough 2-game trip to Washington after a very successful trip in Boston. But they come back home to face the Padres, who they had a very disappointing trip to out west to begin the season. But it's the return of Ronald Acuña Jr., the much anticipated return, second time around, that we've all been waiting for. Cannot wait to see him back in action. We'll talk about that today. And a lot of your questions on today's mailbag podcast have to do with Ronald's return, lineup construction, what to expect, and all of that. It is a mailbag episode. We have over 20 questions to get into on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So before we get into the questions, which there's 22 of them, so a lot to get to, I do want to at least give you the news. Ronald Acuña Jr. activated. We all knew that on Thursday night, but it is official. He is back. What maybe surprised some of you, and to me a little bit, Orlando Arcia was designated for assignment. I just kind of thought it would be Luke Williams, but obviously he can do some other things for you, although they never really let him run once they do pinch run with him. But I think with Eli White being able to handle shortstop, Luke Williams can at least stand out there. Really not a need for Orlando Arcia. Like I joked the other night, or last night, Thursday, they pinch ran Marcell Ozuna for Orlando Arcia, and that's not even really an upgrade speed-wise. You might as well just keep Ozuna in there. So Arcia is not really bringing you a ton of value right now. I guess the only reason to keep him around would be if Nick Allen just completely falls on his face. But I think we've seen a large enough sample size of Nick Allen now to know the glove is legit. And it's even better than what Arcia has been giving you. And Arcia gave you great defense for the last 2 years. Talk all you want about the lack of offense that you got from him the back half of 2023 and being one of the worst hitters in 2024. He was still a really good defender the past 2 years. Now, it looked like he was regressing in that area this season. Nick Allen obviously is on track to win a Gold Glove with what he's doing defensively. So I think it's pretty clear that Nick Allen's going to be the guy for now. And look, it's not like Nick Allen isn't replaceable, but with that being the case, there isn't much that Orlando Arcia can do for you. He's not somebody you're going to pinch hit with. He's not somebody that you really are going to pinch run with, even though you did it with Ozuna. But like I said, that wasn't even an upgrade. He's really just there in case of emergency. And now you have guys in Eli White and Luke Williams on the roster who can do other things for you. And I know there's been a lot of talk about maybe the Braves going after Nicky Lopez, who was just recently DFA'd. And, that makes some sense to give you somebody with a glove and somebody with speed to maybe replace Luke Williams. So it wouldn't be surprising if the Braves did that. But again, just going back to Arcia, he wasn't giving you really any value on your bench. And so it makes sense in hindsight. I didn't really think they'd pull the trigger on it. And they did. So good for the Braves in doing that. But again, thank you to Orlando Arcia. I think he's done some good things for the Braves over the past couple of years, being a part-time player, what he did in 2023. And last year, I know it was a struggle offensively, but a lot of people were putting too much focus on him and the offensive side of things. And that's not really fair to him because that's not the guy that he was supposed to be. And he played good defense last year too. So thank you to Orlando Arcia for what you did the last 2 or 3 years here with the Atlanta Braves. But I think this was the right decision. All right, so let's jump into the questions now. This one from E. Goldie, who says, do you worry about Spencer Strider being overly critical of himself after each substandard start? I am concerned he is putting way too much pressure on himself and he's pitching tight, pitching to be perfect. I'm not worried about it. And everything I hear about Spencer Strider, is that that's just kind of his mentality. And I'm sure, he's what many people would label as a perfectionist, and that's just his personality. It's how God made him. And I don't, when that is your personality, I'm not going to worry about it. If it wasn't his personality and he is somebody that's overly anxious, and I'd be maybe a little bit more concerned. But I just think that's who Spencer Strider is. And for better or worse, that's just going to be his mentality. And he's just overly critical of himself. And I get that. I'm certainly not a perfectionist like that, but I can be overly critical of myself, and it doesn't worry me. It's not something that I feel like I put too much pressure on myself, but it's just my personality. And I think that's just who Spencer Strider is. And he knows that and understands that. And that's why he can be critical of himself. So that doesn't worry me too much. Double A says, credit to Dano Braves, Dano Braves on X for this. I thought this would be fun for you to answer your starting team from scratch, and you have 4 options to choose from. So team 1, Maddox, Murphy, and Olsen. Team 2, Aaron, Necro, and Riley. Team 3, Chipper, Michael Harris, and Tom Glavine. And team 4, Acuña, Matthews, and Smoltz. So those are your 4 options to build a team around. It's a great question, fun exercise. I'll retweet it so you all can play around, or let me know in the comment section below. Just briefly looking through this earlier, and maybe it's because it's Acuña day, but give me Acuña and Eddie Matthews in my lineup hitting a bunch of tanks, and give me John Smoltz. And I know I get killed for this every time in the comments, because I know body of work, Maddox and Glavine are better pitchers, but give me John Smoltz and his dominant, and you can use him as a starter, you can use him as a reliever, and he's one of the best postseason pitchers of all time. So pair that with, one just 5-tool talent, ridiculous, and Acuña and Eddie Matthews in that big power bat. So that's the one I would take, but those are some tough choices in there, but let me know which team you would take. Kane Suttles, which makes more sense, trading Murphy or Ozuna? Need to make more room for Baldwin, but they also can bring pitching help. I just don't think you're going to get the value really for either to help you out a ton. Like maybe you get a mid-rotation starter, maybe you get I'm sure you get a setup reliever, but you really going to trade Sean Murphy and Marcell Ozuna for a setup guy? I think you just let things play out and you find other ways to get Baldwin's bat in the lineup, and just kind of play the hot hand. So I don't think they're trading either. And I don't think the value, the return would be there for what the Braves really need by trading Murphy or Ozuna. Matt Karch, we have too many streaky hitters. I get there is more than one way to get your numbers by season's end, but extremes of hot and cold leads to slumps at the most inopportune time. A couple streaky hitters is okay, but a lineup full is brutal. And I don't disagree. I do not disagree. And that is one, that's the case for a lot of hitters. I mean, it's not just the Braves. Most hitters are going to have hot and cold streaks throughout the season. The difference is when the Braves players have a hot streak, they can absolutely carry you. I mean, look at what Matt Olson has done just over the last couple of days. And you get 2 of those guys going, like he and Ozuna right now, and you can see the offense start to put up big numbers. I think, and that's the difference. Yes, you do have a lineup full of hot and cold guys. Yes, most hitters are hot and cold. Not everybody is. I almost said Juan Soto, even though New York fans probably wouldn't agree with that right now. But not everybody is just consistently good from March all the way through October. That's not the case, but you hope that you have a lineup full of guys that when they are hot and you get 2 or 3 of them hot at the same time, that it's going to be good enough to carry your offense. The problem is it just hasn't been the case for the Braves here lately, and they've had too many of their good hitters that are being bad at the same time. And that's kind of what I talked about this, I think on the postcast, I talked about this, is that when you get Acuña back in here and you have Acuña, Olsen, Riley, Ozuna, you have your big 4. You really just need 2 of those guys to make an impact each and every night. And again, you go back to the game on Thursday, Ozuna and Olsen both have big games. They score 7 runs. That should be enough to win you a ball game. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for, is you have your 4 superstars at the top. You just really need 2 of them to have a big impact each and every night, and then hope you get some contributions from the rest of the team. And that should be good enough to score you 4+ runs in a game, which on a normal night for the Braves pitching staff should be enough. But you're going to have streaky hitters, and I get it. The profile for these Braves hitters can is what sometimes leads to some streakiness with Ozzie and Michael and their kind of over aggressiveness, for Matt Olson and some of his swing and miss with his swing mechanics that can get out of whack. Austin Riley's, notably had some hot and cold streaks in his career. Ozuna's probably been the most consistent over the past 2 years or so. And Acuna, when he's in there, even when he's not hitting, assuming the speed is there, he's somebody, speed never slumps, somebody that can make a difference no matter what. All right, I did not get to enough questions in that first segment. We got a lot more to get to, and there are some coming up on Ronald Acuña Jr. I promise you we'll get into those here next. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't even know who's left in the NBA playoffs right now, as I'm completely focused on Major League Baseball, and they have odds and props over there for Major League Baseball too, whether you're looking at World Series odds, awards, odds at the end of the year, division odds. You can see all that over at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Well, thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out the guys over at Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Let's jump right back into the questions. A lot more to get to. Aegon said, who draws the short straw in his DFA, Fairchild or Williams? But Arcia has a pretty strong case considering both have appeared in more games than him the last month. So we got that answer before we started recording today, and it is Arcia. And you're right on, Aegon. I mean, he hasn't really given you much. And I think it was pretty telling. Although you put in Luke Williams to run and for his speed, and that's I think why you kept him in the game, just to give you another player on the bench in Arcia. But when you put Luke Williams out there at shortstop instead of Arcia in that situation, it's kind of telling. Ransom says, what can we realistically expect from Ronald Acuña Jr. this season in terms of performance? So he's missed more time, about a month more time than I thought he would. Maybe not quite a month, but we're sitting here May 23rd, so maybe about 20 more days on the calendar than I thought he would. I thought he'd be back early May. I still think he can reach 2020. I still think that's a possibility for him. And I think that's kind of what you should expect. I mean, the Braves have been so cautious with him. They've given him so many at-bats. I laughed the other day because Alex Anthopoulos, talked about the fact that he's been playing in sim games, been facing live batting practice since spring training began. He has been getting a lot of reps at the plate. So hopefully that means offensively he's more prepared this time. He's on time with the fastball, which is something he even struggled with last year when he was healthy, or assumingly was healthy at the beginning of last year. So I think the offense is going to be okay. Maybe something like a 270, 280 average, 340 on base percentage. And I think 20 homers, 20 steals, I think is certainly doable for Ronald Acuña Jr., assuming he doesn't need a lot of time off. He doesn't, have to hit the IL for some sort of maintenance or anything like that. Again, hopefully this extreme cautious approach the Braves have taken have kind of done away with all that. It is kind of my hope and expectation that you waited so long to bring him back because you wanted to make sure that when he's back that he is Ronald, and that he's not going to have to continue to have these maintenance days and you're going to have to sit him every now and then. You're probably still going to have to, give him a day off here or there and be smart with how you use him. But I'm hoping that by doing that, they've eliminated some of that, and that when he comes back, he is the Ronald that we know. He's going to be rusty. He hasn't faced major league pitching in quite a while, so you might have to be a little bit patient early on. But I still think 2020 season, 270, 270-ish average, and a guy that's still going to get on base 33-34% of the time is what I would expect and hope for. Matt Carge, we are 7.5 games back. When is this team going to actually wake up and be consistent? We need to start stacking wins. Every other good team does it. If we want to be considered in the upper echelon, we have to win 5, 6, 7 or more in a row. Phillies swept Colorado 4 straight. that was my whole point on yesterday's podcast or this morning's or whenever it went. The last podcast that I did is you had that opportunity. You had that opportunity and they wasted it. And the schedule is pretty tough through the month of June. You do have a little bit of a stretch there in June where you face the Rockies and the Marlins, but there's a Mets series in between. You get the Brewers in there too. So there's a stretch maybe in there, but outside of that, it's really going to have to be the second half of the season where they hit a point in the lineup, a point in the schedule where they can make a run like that. Because outside of that, they're facing some postseason contenders here through the rest of the month of June. Like I said, outside of that little pocket where they face the Brewers and the Rockies and the Marlins. So they just wasted their best opportunity of the season yet, and they probably won't get another one for a little while. Isaac Rayfield says, do you think it is time to pull the trigger on a 6-man rotation, or do you think that they won't consider it? I mean, based on what Snicker said, he doesn't want to do it. And I don't know. I go back and forth on it. If you got 6 starters that are throwing the ball well, then yeah, I think it's a great idea to kind of limit the innings on some of these guys. I think part of that too is if you have an offense that you can trust every day and an offense that you can trust to win you a game, like you were hoping that they would do on Thursday, then I'd probably feel a little bit better about going to a 6-man rotation. But when you do that, you're not getting Chris Sale as often. You're not getting Spencer Schwellenbach as often. And when you need all the wins you can get, you want to throw your best guys as often as you can. So that's part of the problem with going in 6-man rotation is that you're going to see more, Bryce Elders, AJ Smith-Shawvers, Grant Holmes, who have thrown the ball well at times, and even Spencer Strider, who doesn't quite look like himself. And you're going to get less Chris Sale and Spencer Schwellenbach and some of your top pitchers that you want going more often. Cavs Buckeyes, did the Braves front office put too much on the shoulders of Strider and Acuña this winter? So we finally get to the question that I titled this episode after. So thanks for this question, Cavs Buckeyes, because I think it's a very deep question that we probably don't have time for. To answer it simply, yes. I think this front office, I think it's clear now in the offseason that they didn't want to go over the luxury tax. Yes, Alex Anthopoulos has said there are some moves that they were willing to make that would have taken them over it, but I think if they could avoid it, they wanted to stay under the luxury tax. And I think part of that is because they wanted to see what they had in Acuña and Strider. And I think a lot of pressure is being put on those two guys to come back after not playing for a year and just be who they have been. Like, I'm excited about Acuña's comeback, and maybe as excited as anyone. But to put the pressure on him to come back and save this team and to save this lineup, and to put the pressure on Strider to come back and be the dominant force in this rotation, I think that's unfair. And I think you should have gone out and done more to help the lineup, to get a legitimate outfield bat, which I guess they kind of did in Profar. You couldn't foresee that coming. So I'll give them a pass there. But I think you should have done more in getting some help in the rotation to bolster the staff. If Strider is not that guy, and if Strider does need more time, and they didn't do that. So I think they, by their lack of moves, specifically in the rotation, like I said, you couldn't see the Profar thing coming, but specifically in the rotation, I think they didn't do Strider a lot of favors, in particular by not getting enough support for the starting rotation. And I do think that they're now at this point of the season, I think there is a lot of pressure on Acuña to come in and bring this lineup some consistency and help this lineup take off. Another one from Isaac, who says, who would you be willing to give up to get a high-end setup guy at the deadline? Good question. I mean, I'd have to look at the list of prospects, but certainly not your top ones. Certainly not a Cam Caminiti, not even a Waldrop at this point. I think you got to see J.R. Ritchie is another untouchable for me. Jose Perdomo, Didier Fuentes, another untouchable for me. Diego Torrens. I think outside of those guys, I'd pretty much be comfortable giving up anybody for a setup. And it depends, what type of setup guy are we talking about? Somebody that could potentially close, somebody that has dominant stuff, somebody that has years of control. Because while I'm willing to trade like a Nacho Alvarez, I'd want somebody that has some control. But those are kind of my untouchables. Caminiti, I'd move J.R. Ritchie in the right move, but I'd be very hesitant. Not for a setup guy, and I guess that's the question here. Perdomo, Torrens, those are some of my untouchables right now. Outside of that, I'm pretty much comfortable moving just about anyone for again, the right piece, and it have to make sense. Another one from Isaac. Well, actually, this one's from Isaac's girlfriend, who's not on X, but says, what is it about the Braves' approach at the plate that makes them so inconsistent? And do you think they need to change their identity as an offense to fix those inconsistency problems? So we just talked a little bit about the Braves' inconsistency, and I kind of noted, some of what happened with some of the players. Just too many strikeouts for Olsen at times once his swing gets wonky. Ozzie and Michael just have that aggressive approach that lead to some inconsistencies at times. And Riley, he just gets lost every now and then. And you can see it, especially on that slider away, as just every now and then he gets lost at the plate. And that's why you see some of those guys get inconsistent. And again, that's most players in a major league season. They're going to go through stretches like that. I do, as far as do they need a new approach change or a new identity, I think they've tried that this year. You've seen them change their approach a little bit to be less aggressive. And again, I think at times it's been good. And at times we've seen good results from that. But at times, I think it's also taken away what's made them so special in the past with the power. And so it's trying to find that balance of how do you maintain that power? And I'm okay if the power even dips down a little bit if it's going to lead to higher batting average and more on base. But what we've seen at times is that it's led to less power, but it hasn't quite benefited in more on base. And they've got to find that right balance of a new approach, being less aggressive, taking more pitches, working deeper counts, putting the ball in play, but also not taking away their power. And I still think they're trying to find that right approach and identity. Ed Helinsky says, as it stands right now this season, what has gotten you warm and fuzzy with the Braves, and what's given you, I don't know how to say the word, the second word in a week that I don't know. So you all are trying to test my vocabulary here. But I think it means ultimately what's made you stressful so far. What's given me the most stress is the offense, because I am one that just chalked last year up as, okay, you were coming off a historic season. You knew there's going to be some regression. You ended up having a ton of injuries to the big guys. And I just kind of chalked it up to that and figured coming into this year, they'd all be back and this offense would be, at least a top 10 offense, if not a top 5 offense. And fact of the matter is they've been a middling offense, and mid to even back half of the MLB rankings so far. And that's what's given me the most stress. What's giving me the warm and fuzzies with the Braves right now is, Drake Baldwin, AJ Smith-Shawver up until last night, and then the return of Ronald. Really the return of Ronald and Strider. I know Strider hasn't quite been there yet, but just the excitement level that those guys bring to watching a game, I think is mostly what's giving me the warm and fuzzies. The breakout of Eli White, and I know he's cooled off, but I think that's been a lot of fun. So seeing some different guys step up that maybe you weren't expecting, I think is what's made this season so far exciting for me. But the offense is what's definitely stressed me out the most. I wasn't expecting much from the bullpen, and I still think for the most part they've been either as good or better than I expected. The starting pitching's been fine, but the offense, I just thought they would come out this year with a chip on their shoulder after how bad last year was, and prove to everybody that they still are one of the best offenses in baseball, and they just haven't done that to this point. All right, we got several more questions to get to. We're probably going to go overtime today, but that's okay. Braves are used to going extra innings, and we'll get more into these questions here next. Next question comes from Matthew Carter, who says, be honest, do we need to fire the third base coach? Look, I don't know that we're quite to that level yet, but it's two bad sins within a 6 day stretch here that are just inexcusable sins. And I might have just said sins. They weren't sins. There's nothing he did biblically wrong here, but maybe you disagree with that. Maybe there is something in First Corinthians or something about sending players that are going to be dead. And sorry, going down a tangent there. These are bad decisions. And I don't think it's fireable, but you certainly got to learn from it. And I think you have to know more of the situation and who's coming up. And I think that was the bigger thing. And the outs and watching the runner at first. And again, I still haven't seen the angle, but if Austin took off from the jump, like Matt Olson hits that ball and Riley is at full sprint speed, then yeah, you send him. And I think you take that risk. But I would imagine that Riley probably hesitated for at least a minute to make sure that that ball got over the right fielder's head. And once that happens, you got to hold him up. With Ozuna coming up, 1 out, you got to hold him. So I think it's a guy who's, again, he's been coaching for a while. It's not like he's new at this, but I just think there has to be better decisions made there. Houston McInvale says, where is Scott Blewett? Is he not supposed to be the long man for days like today when the starter goes out early? Feels like that would be better than using half the pen in one night. I feel like he is being underutilized at this point, and we probably need to see a little bit more of him. And you use Aaron Bummer. I know you had a day off in between, but basically in back-to-back games, you go to Aaron Bummer earlier and push him for multiple innings when you probably could have done that with Scott Blewett. So I do think he is being underutilized a little bit. Justin Shoemake, is it time to be concerned with both Albies and Harris? Harris is still young and has time to figure it out, but Albies is the one I'm really worried about, but neither one is putting up quality at bat. So I saw some stats for Michael Harris the other day, and they're all expected stats, which I know not everybody believes in, but they show that he's actually had better plate discipline lately and better contact. He's just not getting the results. So that made me feel a little bit better about Michael Harris. Albies, I think, is the more concerning one for me because it's always been a pretty bad profile, but he's been able to kind of overcome that with the big power. But if that doesn't happen, then who is Ozzie? Because it is a guy that's always had bad approach, bad plate discipline, bad swing decisions, but he's going to have these very hot streaks and he's going to wind up with 25 to 30 home runs and he's going to hit, 260. And it's always just been kind of fine over the length of a full season. And I think he's earned enough to, see how this plays out if he's able to stay healthy. But every year he's been healthy and played a full season, he's been one of the top second basemen in baseball offensively. So you're just going to have to ride it out. But he does concern me more of those two. Atlanta Sports Central, it feels like this team has lost its mojo and forgot how good they are. Do you think the further removed we keep getting from major success will cause the team to be complacent with being average? That's hard to answer because it's a mental state, and I can't see into the mental state of these players. I'm not their therapist, but I do think losing is contagious. I certainly think that feeds on itself, and you can see a team spiral like that. But I don't know. I don't see that happening with this Braves team. There's still a lot of youth in there. There's still a lot of guys that haven't done it, that still have a lot to play for. I mean, you look at a Michael Harris, you look at Acuña, even though he technically has a ring, he wasn't part of that 21 team. He wants to get there. You look at Matt Olson, you look at a Spencer Strider. There's still guys in here that haven't accomplished that goal of winning a World Series. And I still think there's plenty of motivation in there. But I do agree with you. The more you lose and the more you lose, close games, that can kind of feed on itself. But it's a long season and that can turn around quickly as well. You win a couple of games like that, you get some good momentum. That's why it's been so frustrating that they've blown some of these games where you've had a stretch to go and win, 5, 6, 7 in a row, but you blew some of these games by not using your best guys. And that can kill your momentum right there. But, you get a guy like Ronald back today. That's going to give you a lot of momentum, and that can certainly help and get you on a roll. But I think this team is still in a good place mentally and where they need to be. Chris Mofield, do you really think this is a playoff team? I do. I do think this is the playoff team, but they can't keep letting games get away like they did, 3 games now in the past week that they just let get away. And you can't have that happen with the hole that you put yourself in. Aaron Abston says, where are the Braves at with roster moves? Do we trust our current guys during the inconsistency, or do we need fresh faces on the team? I think it's the roster you got. I don't see any major changes coming other than Acuña coming back, which is a big roster change. I think that's going to put everybody back in their spots. Look, the Braves leadoff spot has been horrendous, and there's really nobody else that can do the job other than Acuña. And when you have somebody like that at the top, it really settles everybody else in the lineup. So again, I'm not trying to put too much pressure on Acuña, but I do think it's going to help a ton. But outside of that, I don't think there's much roster shakeup coming the rest of the way, other than Profar when he comes back in, I think, late June, early July. That will be a little bit of a shakeup and could be a boost. But I don't see anything else happening lineup-wise. Jacob Cole, what would your lineup look like with Ronald back? So we'll see tonight, but I would go Ronald, obviously, at leadoff. I'd still go Riley second, Olsen, Ozuna. I'm tempted to put Olsen 2 and Ozuna 3rd just because Riley's struggling right now and Olsen seems to be heating up. But we tried Olsen in the 2 spot his first year coming over, and it just didn't work well. So I'm even fine putting him 4th and maybe going Riley, Ozuna, Olsen. But those are your top 4 in some order. And then you go with the catchers. You either go with Murphy or Baldwin. And then you probably go Michael Harris if it's a righty on the mound. I think it's time to move Ozzie down. You're probably going to go Harris and Ozzie, even though I don't like having them back-to-back in the lineup. And then you're, Williams, Allen down at the bottom. So that's how I would put it together. Just, I think I said Williams. I meant Eli White. So Eli White and Nick Allen, down at the bottom, giving you that speed to kind of feed the top. Nate, would it be crazy to throw Ozuna in left field? Yes. I just stopped you right there. Yes, it would be crazy to put Ozuna in left field. Maybe you can try Baldwin out there to get your best bats in the lineup, but I think Ozuna's days in the field, or at least in the outfield, are done. Maybe we see him make an appearance at first base at some point, but yeah, I don't think you can put Ozuna in the field anymore. Nate, what's going on with Ronaldo Lopez? Is he expected to return this season? So if he comes back, it'll be late in the year, and that could be a big addition for the bullpen. But we won't get really any updates on that probably till after the All-Star break. And last one, this one from Dustin Milton. Do you think it's possible the Braves are simply just a 500 team and that's as good as it gets? It just feels like this team and fan base is counting on Acuña to come back and save our season. I'm not sure that's a reasonable expectation to ask of him. And again, kind of bringing it full circle with the title of this podcast, are we putting too much pressure on Acuña? Yes, we probably are. But also, yes, I think he can do that. I think he can elevate this team to be the team that it needs to be. And I don't think this is just simply a 500 baseball team. And I will continue to say that until it doesn't happen. I said the same thing last year. It ended up being an 89 win team. So I do think there's more to this team than what we've seen. They have not consistently played their best baseball yet. It has been a tough schedule and will continue to be a tough schedule to begin the first half of the season, but it does get easier in the second half. But, they got to beat these teams too. And I think they're more than capable of doing that. Acuña is going to help, but it's going to take others. It's going to take Olsen. It's going to take Ozuna and Riley. It's going to take Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies figuring it out and not just being automatic outs in the lineup. And if that all happens, which is certainly possible, and it's not like these guys haven't done it before, it's certainly possible, then this team can be what it's supposed to be. And I think the rotation is good enough. They are going to have to make some additions to the bullpen to shore things up there. But yeah, I still believe this is a playoff team. I still believe this is a team that is better than just a 500 record. And hopefully that plays out the rest of the way. But I still have a lot of confidence in this team to get it done. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Todd Twilley. Your number 5 and 6 hitters are going to see significant more at bats than your 8 and 9 hitters, which is why the philosophy of putting your worst hitters in the 6th and 7th spot doesn't make sense. So yeah, and that's why you put Acuña at the top. You want your best hitters getting more at bats, and I think that's where he's going to be. Carlos Ray Norris, Albies hitting second. Is that honestly the lineup that they put out today? I really hope that's not the case. They should not be batting second, except maybe against a lefty. Sugar Brown, Braves lose too many one-run games. They've also won a good amount of one-run games too. They've just played in a lot of them. Braves Thrills, I am confident that they'll make the wild card. Yeah, there's a lot of good teams in the National League. It's going to be tough, but I'm still pretty confident they'll at least get a wild card spot. Thank you all for joining me here today. Michael Mitchell, Jack Hodges, Braves Thrills. Thank you all for joining me here today. Chris Fuller with a live comment, always leaving comments on the YouTube to help out the algorithms. I appreciate that. Todd Twilley, appreciate you all joining me here on a Friday afternoon for this mailbag edition of Locked On Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit the thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. We'll be back with a postcast on Friday at night talking about Ronald's return and hopefully a big win for the Atlanta Braves in that return, and Chris Sale on the mound. We'll be back with the postcast all weekend along with the Braves and the Padres, and then we'll be back with you on Monday recapping everything from the weekend. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.